So now it's my delight and my pleasure to introduce to you somebody that I respect tremendously as one of the thought leaders in the integrative medical world, and that's Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. Dr. Teitelbaum is a board-certified internist, and he's also the medical director of the Practitioners Alliance Network. He is the lead author of 4 groundbreaking studies on treatment for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and every single one of his studies has been found to have some effective interventions that make a real difference in the lives of people that are suffering with these diseases. He's the author of many books. We haven't the space to list all of them, but I want to point out a few: From Fatigue to Fantastic, Pain-Free 1, 2, 3, and also the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution. He's been featured in publications. He's been on the radio. He's been on TV. He's been on the Dr. Oz show. He's visited with Oprah and friends. He has spent a great deal of his professional life trying to get the word out that there are indeed effective ways that you can deal with this devastating syndrome. He is known as a chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia insider because he had this problem himself when he was in medical school. He had to drop out of medical school in order to recover, and because of that, they didn't even have a name for the syndrome when this struck him. He has spent the rest of his life dedicated to finding answers for these problems. And so without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. Welcome, Dr. Teitelbaum.
Cheryl, great to be with you and with everybody today. So, for those of you who have fibromyalgia, who have Lyme disease, or have both, we're going to give you critical information and a really good understanding of what's going on so you know how to get well now. That's what this is all about. And please ask questions. I will stay on until everybody's question is answered unless they throw us all out sooner. So ask your questions because that's really a critical part of getting well. You need to know you have the power to get the information you need, and you're going to get that today. So let's start with a simple question. Is it Lyme disease or is it chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, ME? And the answer is the key to getting well, and it may not be exactly what you thought. So let's start by taking a little look at effective treatment for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And this includes people who have Lyme disease that triggered their fibromyalgia. And not just Lyme disease, but literally dozens of other infections. So, does this sound like you? Tired, achy, brain fog, can't sleep. If this sounds like you, you've got fibromyalgia. Now, you can have Lyme disease with it. Many people do. And the way to tell if it's simply Lyme disease or fibromyalgia is the 4th one on this list. Can you get a good night's sleep? If you have severe insomnia despite being exhausted, you also have a secondary fibromyalgia. So that's a key take-home point today. You got Lyme disease. If you can't sleep, especially if you're tired and achy, that Lyme disease blew a circuit breaker in the brain called the hypothalamus and triggered fibromyalgia. When that happens, whether that happens from Lyme disease, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, any of these things, you've got to also treat the secondary fibromyalgia if you really want to get your life back. So let's take a look. If you take a look at Lyme disease, Lyme is an important piece of a very big fibromyalgia puzzle. Most of you are familiar with the symptoms of Lyme disease. And here's the thing. So many of you have been given antibiotics. And you found, wow, especially I took the tetracycline, doxycycline, minocycline, and my symptoms improved initially. But then they started getting worse again, or they plateaued. And what's going on here is the candida overgrowth from the antibiotics dragged you back down again. So if this sounds like you, the antibiotics helped and then they got worse, and you keep chasing higher and higher doses of antibiotics and different ones, especially if you have nasal congestion, postnasal drip, clearing the throat a lot kind of a thing, or irritable bowel syndrome, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, presume that you have candida, either in association with the Lyme or secondary to the antibiotic, because when you treat that, your antibiotics are going to start working again. So the antibiotics what happened in Lyme disease and fibromyalgia is basically you got an infection. That infection caused you to blow a fuse, and that circuit breaker is called the hypothalamus. And the antibiotics help clear the infection, but you've got to turn the circuit breaker back on. And the way that you do that is with the SHINE protocol, S-H-I-N-E. We'll talk about that and how you can use that to recover. So let's take a look at our research using the SHINE protocol. In the study, it was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled gold standard design. And half the people got all active, half got all placebo. Nobody knew who was getting what till the end. And what we found is that 91% of people with fibromyalgia, including Lyme disease-induced fibromyalgia, got better. They had moderate to marked improvement in their symptoms. And let's see what those numbers look like. Now, this was the title of the study, Effective Treatment for CFS and Fibromyalgia. And what we found is that of the 32 people that we had in each group, the half of the people in the active group rated themselves as much better by the end of an average of 99 days. And another 13 said they were better, not cured, but better. 2 were the same, 1 was much worse. In the placebo group, only 3 people felt much better and 9 somewhat better. Most people rated themselves as no change, as would be expected. Now, what was the degree of improvement? We used a visual analog scale. Basically, asked people on a scale of 0 to 500, and we used 500 because we had 5 key outcomes. Those include things like fatigue, sleep, whether their overall well-being, pain, cognitive function. And they rated on a scale of 0 to 100. The average person in both groups started at about 170 out of 500, rating their overall well-being on these 5 scales. And you'll see that it went up to an average of 310 in the active group, minimal change. So that's a dramatic improvement in quality of life. And so many of you have found that I've taken this, I felt a little better, then bam, crashed again. Because if you're only putting together and strengthening one link in the chain that's weak, you're going to strengthen that and then another chain is going to pop. You've got to treat the whole process. And that's what we're going to discuss today, is how to do that. And the 2-year follow-up found that by the end of 2 years, people continued to even get better and better than they had, despite being able to wean off of most of the treatments. So it's kind of like a sprained ankle. You use crutches to allow the ankle to heal, and then you throw the crutches away. We're going to give you a number of tools to help you recover, and as your body rights itself, you can start to throw those tools away. These are not forever in most people. So the study conclusion, and for those of you who have ever published a study, you know that most journal editors will not let you make this bold of a statement unless the data is incredibly strong. The study conclusion, effective treatment is now available for CFS and fibromyalgia. And we have treated thousands of people. We treat people from all over the world, often by phone consultation, and we routinely see people getting their lives back. So let's take a look at some of the symptoms of CFS and fibromyalgia. These are overlapping processes. We talked about the insomnia, which is a hallmark of the illness. If the person can get a good night's sleep and wake up refreshed, I'd look for other things, not fibromyalgia. The widespread pain. Many of you have found that you have a lot of sensitivities. You're sensitive to most everything. And that's part of the immune system being overwhelmed in this illness. But for those of you who it's severe, there's 2 things you want to look at. There's a wonderful acupressure technique called NAET, and you have the website here, www.naet.com. That is very, very effective at eliminating sensitivities. So the website can give you the name of a practitioner near you. Also, there's another process called mast cell activation, which when treated can help decrease the sensitivities. Many of you find that brain fog is common. In fact, you're worried, oh my God, am I getting Alzheimer's? The answer is no, you're not. I've never seen this progress to Alzheimer's. Um, in fibromyalgia, it's difficult with short-term memory, word finding, names, so you think, oh my God, I don't remember my kid's name. It's just a word finding process. Fibromyalgia is when you keep forgetting where you left the keys, but Alzheimer's is not. Alzheimer's is when you forget how to use the keys. You don't have Alzheimer's. And the brain fog clears up with the SHINE protocol along with the other symptoms. And many of you have chronic sinus, nasal congestion problems, irritable bowel syndromes, both candida. Frequent infections, average 32.5 pound weight gain. And when you ask people, how's your sex drive? 73% say, what sex drive? So these are all common symptoms of the process. And for those of you with Lyme disease, sounds a lot like it, doesn't it? Well, this is because Lyme disease is one of numerous triggers for fibromyalgia. As we said, it's like blowing a fuse. That's what fibromyalgia is. It's an energy crisis where when the energy deficit becomes severe enough, you trip a circuit breaker called the hypothalamus. And the question is, well, how can you blow a fuse? Well, there's hundreds of ways. How do you trip a circuit breaker in your body? There are hundreds of ways. And Lyme disease is one of those. And it's a very important common trigger for CFS and fibromyalgia. But again, if you blow a circuit breaker because you have too many space heaters plugged in and off goes the circuit breaker, if you unplug the space heaters, the lights don't go back on. If you get rid of the Lyme, that's not enough to get rid of the problem. You have to turn the circuit breaker back on. Now, there is no good test for Lyme disease. The tests that are out there either miss most people who have it, or I think tend to overdiagnose a bit. And I prefer to treat Lyme disease based predominantly on symptoms. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. When do you know to give an antibiotic? So those of you who have been treated for Lyme disease, who've seen that initial improvement, often followed by worsening, as we mentioned, this is a critical take-home point. The antibiotics trigger secondary candida yeast overgrowth. And if you don't also treat that, you're just going to go right back downhill. As we mentioned, if you have insomnia too, you have fibromyalgia, that has to be treated. The SHINE protocol will do so effectively. And then when you treat the entire process, the trigger, which was Lyme disease, and then turning the circuit breaker back on, which is the fibromyalgia, you get your life back. And it's really fun to see. I mean, we see this day in and day out with the folks who we treat. They get their lives back. So in fibromyalgia, we talked about it being a body-wide energy crisis. It causes you to blow a fuse, trips a circuit breaker called the hypothalamus. And as people ask, well, how can you blow a fuse? What causes a fibromyalgia? And as we mentioned, there are literally hundreds of things, but they tend to fall, in addition to the infections, there are several key categories, common kinds of things that we'll see. Infections, including Lyme and yeast overgrowth, viral infections, parasites, numerous infections can do it. Other immune issues, such as autoimmune illnesses, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's, multiple sclerosis. About a third of people who have those illnesses have secondary fibromyalgia, and it's usually missed by the doctor. And the problem is the treatment is very different for fibromyalgia and autoimmune diseases. And you have to treat both. If you know somebody with Lyme or you know somebody with autoimmune diseases that's doing poorly, give them this information. Hormonal deficiencies. Just another study came out this month showing low thyroid in people with fibromyalgia relative to healthy controls, and despite the blood test still being technically normal. We'll discuss the problem with blood testing in a little bit. Adrenal problems. How do you tell low adrenal? Not by the tests. You tell low adrenal because you get irritable when hungry. It's called hangry. food sensitivities, toxins, nutritional deficiencies, stress, disrupted sleep. These are all common triggers for the illness. So we talked about the circuit breaker that goes offline. It's called the hypothalamus. Here's a little picture of it, not very helpful, so we'll go on. So what does the hypothalamus do? You know that if you blow a fuse in your home, trip a circuit breaker, you go to the circuit box and see, oh, number 17 is flipped off. And you look at the panel, what does it do? It says control living room lights, da-da-da-da-da, has a list. So if you go to the control panel of the brain and you say, what does the hypothalamus do? That circuit controls sleep, which is why you can't sleep even though you're exhausted. It controls hormonal function, temperature regulation, and also autonomic function. That means blood pressure, pulse, sweating, bowel function. Many of you find that your gut is in an uproar, or else you haven't pooped for 2 weeks. You find that when you stand up, you may get lightheaded, or you have a rapid pulse, what's called POTS or NMH. All of that is caused by that hypothalamic dysfunction. Why does that area go offline? Because it uses an enormous amount of energy for its size. And therefore, when you have an energy crisis, it goes offline first, acting as a circuit breaker. Interestingly, this is not something broken in your body. This is your body's attempt to take you out of the game during an energy crisis and prevent you from spending energy you don't have, which could cause much more dangerous long-term harm. Like a circuit breaker, it's really, really annoying when it goes off, but it protects the rest of the home from any permanent harm, which is, as you get your life back and feel healthy again, will turn out to have been a good thing that it did that. Now, people ask, why do I have the pain? Whether you have Lyme disease, whether you have fibromyalgia, you're going to be in pain. And that's because as the energy goes down, it's interesting, muscles require more energy to relax than to contract. Now you think, that doesn't make sense. If I'm going to, lift something heavy, it's going to take more energy to do that than it is to let the muscle go. But yeah, biochemically, that's not so. Muscles are like a spring. Stretching them out and relaxing them is where it takes the energy. You release that energy as the muscle contracts. And if you think about it, when you come home after, a few people have a hard workout, they don't come home and say, honey, my muscles are so loose and limp. They're so tight, because the energy drain in the muscles causes them to get stuck in the shortened position. Understanding that helps to get pain-free, because if you realize your pain is predominantly coming from the muscles being locked in the shortened position, and when they get stuck in the shortened position, they hurt. And you'll find that if you stretch those muscles, say you have a massage or something like that, or a chiropractic adjustment, they feel better for a couple hours, maybe a few days. But then that low energy causes the muscles to go right back into the shortened position again. And there you go, back to the pain again. So the key to getting rid of the pain is to restore energy production so the muscles can release. Now, most of you know that there's many kinds of pain in fibromyalgia and Lyme disease, and there's 7 key types of pain. You have the muscle pain is what it starts with, then it triggers nerve pain, small fiber neuropathy, brain pain called central sensitization, gut pain, migraine, headaches. You'll see this whole progression of different kind of pains. And when it gets really severe, even light touch to the skin called allodynia. Each of these pains is different and requires a different treatment, but all of them can be effectively treated. There's no need to be suffering with pain. It's really unnecessary. So as you go through this process and looking to understand, why did I blow a fuse? What caused the energy crisis? If you had a sudden onset, we can track it to about 2 months of time. You want to think about infections, especially if you had a tick bite with a classic rash, if you had a flu-like onset, if you were traveling and came down with Montezuma's revenge, you want to think parasites, and there's a host of sensitive infections. Also with sudden onset, you want to think injury. Post-injury fibromyalgia is common, or postpartum. People do well during pregnancy, But after they deliver, all these high hormones during pregnancy suddenly disappear, and it's like somebody pulls the rug out from under you. And so postpartum fibromyalgia is common. If you had a gradual onset, it's more often going to be things like low thyroid, low adrenal, perimenopause, nutritional deficiencies, yeast or candida from excess sugar, antibiotics. Lyme disease can sometimes come in very gradually too. It really varies from person to person. Autoimmune diseases, lupus, for example, sleep disorders like sleep apnea, restless leg, or severe stress. Your body doesn't distinguish between the stress of an infection and the stress of living with an alcoholic or an abusive family member. So all of these put a drain on the body's energy reserves. Now, people ask me, what's a nice Jewish doctor like me doing in a field like this, treating holistically and treating fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome? And the answer is, well, had it. When I was in medical school, I came down with a nasty viral infection, what I called the drop-dead flu. The blood test showed that there was a severe infection, but they couldn't, and viral infection. They couldn't identify what it was. And 6 weeks later, I was still pretty much non-functional, near bedbound. And when I didn't get well, after a while, the professors figured, well, he's just a depressed med student. They call it depressed med student syndrome. But since I was paying my own way through medical school, I couldn't work, and I had to drop out of medical school. I couldn't pay my rent, and I found myself homeless, sleeping in parks. And it's funny how the universe always gives us everything we need. It was as if somebody put a homeless, holistic medical school sign on my park bench. Naturopaths came by, herbalists came by, chiropractors came by, energy workers came by, physicians came by, and each of them taught me bits and pieces of the puzzle that I needed to learn to get myself well. And back then, there wasn't even a name for this condition. And I was able to recover, went back to medical school, did honors, did great. And I've spent the last 4 decades with a simple goal. And that goal is making effective treatment available for everyone. And that's why I'm here today. I don't take money from any pharmaceutical or natural product companies. And all my royalties go to charity, things like that. It just keeps it cleaner. And people keep asking, why am I traveling over 100,000 miles a year, many years, all over the world, lecturing and teaching and being on the media? It's easy because I got well. I know what a bear this disease can be, and I've seen it go away in thousands of people. And the most fun thing in the world for me is giving you this information so you can get your life back. And I'll tell you, people say, well, what a sacrifice you make. Because 3/4 of the time that I spend is unpaid, is teaching. I say there is no sacrifice here. This is the most fun thing in the world. So let's look at how you can get your life back. We talked about you blew a fuse, and whether that was triggered by Lyme disease or any of a number of other things. You address 5 key areas that need to be treated to make the problem go away. And write this down. If you don't have a piece of paper, just write it on your forearm. Write down the letters SHINE, S-H-I-N-E. This is your protocol. This is your roadmap to recovery. You want to optimize sleep, optimize hormonal function, address all infections that need to be treated, and those are different, totally different from person to person. Give optimized nutritional support, and exercise as able. Now, you'll notice I added the word as able. Some idiots out there say, well, just exercise. Well, ignore them. They're fools. You already know that if you do too much exercise, you can be wiped out for 3 days. It's called post-exertional malaise. And some people are sitting there kind of make-believe you're crazy because it's just exercise. Like, they're idiots. Ignore them. The bottom line, though, is for any problem, cancer-related fatigue, it's been shown that reconditioning exercise is critical. Nobody would dream of saying, oh, well, you don't have cancer, then you're just crazy. And it's no different for this disease. It's a very real physical disease, but maintaining conditioning as able is important. So we're going to go through a lot of things because this is, you have to put the whole puzzle together. You have to take care of the whole process. And even though we treat people, my new patient consults are 3 hours long, and not everybody can afford that. So what we did was we made a simple tool. I actually hold the U.S. patent for computerized doctor because I realized I can't reach 50 million people worldwide with this disease, but online the computer programs can. So we have a free quiz online. It can analyze, go through symptoms, the whole thing. And you don't need to have the blood test, but if we have lab tests, you can put in the pertinent lab tests. It'll analyze those as well. And it'll tell you exactly what's draining your energy and how to optimize energy production. It's called the Energy Analysis Program. We used to charge for it. It was $400, but we told people that, you know, if you couldn't afford, we'd let you do it for free. And 80% of people wrote back that they were impoverished from the disease. And my wife and I decided we'd just make it free for everybody. So this is my gift to you, the free energy analysis program at vitality101or101.com. It's step 3 on the page. Go ahead, just do that. It will tell you exactly what's sapping your energy and give you a very detailed protocol for optimizing energy production. So you don't have to write frantically today. It'll pick up all of that. So let's take a look. Do you just have Lyme disease? As you mentioned before, the key question is, can you get a good night's sleep? If you have insomnia despite being exhausted, you have secondary fibromyalgia from the Lyme disease. So the question is, SHINE includes eye for infections. What makes me decide to give antibiotics? Well, in those people who have chronic low-grade fevers, meaning anything over 98.6, is there joint swelling or redness? Do you have a history of vertigo? Many, if not most people with fibromyalgia and CFS have dizziness, but it's more like the dizziness of standing on the deck of a ship that's moving in a boat. It's not the spinning around in a circle, passing out and throwing up kind of dizziness. That feeling of spinning in a circle, that's vertigo. And if you have that, then I'm going to consider that Lyme was a trigger and give the antibiotics. A number of infections can trigger the vertigo, including some viral infections. And if I see a Bell's palsy, where half the face goes paralyzed for a while, I'm going to be going with antivirals and antibiotics both. Does that person have a feeling of chronic lung congestion? I'm going to give antibiotics. Do you have scalp scabs, these little scabby things on your head that you keep picking at? I'm going to go with the Zithromax or erythromycin. Or, and here's one of the most telling things that the person has an antibiotic-sensitive infection triggering their fibro. Do you have a history of being allergic to multiple unrelated antibiotics? People come in and they say, I'm allergic to tetracycline, Cipro, and sulfo, and nothing else. Those aren't allergies. Those are 3 chemically totally unrelated compounds, and that they're allergic to all 3 of those. And not much else. They may have sensitivities, but not the medication allergies. It says that wasn't allergies to the antibiotics. Those are called Herxheimer reactions. That is a reaction, it's called die-off reaction. Now, when you kill the bugs quickly, your body has to get rid of all these dead body parts of the bugs. And the dead body parts of the bugs can trigger that reaction that you had that your doctor said, oh, you're allergic. So the key for that is to go with very, very low dosing of the antibiotics, start really slow, and do a good detox program at the same time, and just slowly ease up the dose as is comfortable. So let's take a look at the N in SHINE, because N stands for nutrition, and optimizing nutrition is critical to health. People ask me, what vitamin and mineral do I need? And the answer is all of them, by definition. And there are over 50 critical ones that have been stripped out of our diet and food processing. Now, one of the first things that I helped design was a vitamin powder. I got really tired that people had to take handfuls of pills all day to get the basic optimized nutritional support that they needed. And I designed a powder that you take one drink and it replaces over 35 pills. If you think I'm kidding, try getting it what's in the one drink. And if you can get it in less than 35 pills, look at $100. Most people, it takes them 60 pills or so to do that. It'll have 50 key nutrients, including malic acid, other energy cofactors, inositol, amino acids, vitamins, high-dose B complex, minerals. It's easy. Keep your life simple. It's cheap, simple, one drink a day. And you're going to find, most people find they're feeling a good bit better just from that. Another key nutritional thing, because our diet has lost most of its omega-3s because of food processing. And optimizing omega-3s, which we think of as fish oils, are critical for balancing inflammation, optimizing brain health, and optimizing mood. But the problem is, to get enough of the omega-3s to really be clinically effective, people have to take 8 big hunker fish oil pills each day, which is nuts. And then they're burping up fish oil all day, and every time they burp, every cat in the neighborhood has their nose going up like an infield fly, and it's like, no. Get a vectorized omega-3, because if you do that, 1 pill a day replaces 8 big fish oil pills. Again, you're going to find a big focus of mine is making this easy for people, because there's a lot of things need to be done to put the whole system back together again. So use the right stuff to make it really easy and effective for you. And the fish oil is funny, not just as a balance inflammation, but it's really helpful for mood. If you find that you're depressed or got the blues, they asked me to write a textbook chapter for the main nutrition textbook for students in the United States at most universities. They're the 2 main ones. And they asked me to write the chapter on psychological disorders. And it's amazing how many studies show that a good, proper form of the fish oil can make all the difference. Other critical nutritional advice, you want to increase your water intake. Now you're going to say, I'm already drinking like a fish. And yes, you are, but you're peeing like a racehorse. The hormone called antidiuretic hormone, or anti-peeing hormone, that holds on to water is low. And because of that, you leak like a colander. It's like a bucket with holes in it. And if you stop drinking, you're just going to get dehydrated. So you need to drink a lot of water, and you need to increase your salt intake. That should be on the slide. So restricting salt in this disease is a good way to crash and burn. You have trouble holding on to salt and water, increase your salt intake as well. Got a good crystal sea salt, but really any salt, just make a massive difference in how you feel. And avoid sugar intake. Sugar is toxic in this disease. It aggravates the candida. It aggravates the low blood sugar problems because it puts you on a sugar roller coaster. So increase water, decrease sugar, and increase salt. People ask what diet will feel best, and the answer is it really varies from person to person. And I suspect one of the reasons we have such a wide variety of foods to choose from is that each of us needs different things, and even the same person needs different things at different times. So the way to tell us what leaves you feeling the best, not just immediately when you eat it, but long term. Generally, what your body asks for is what it wants, except for sugar, because that acts like a drug, so it gets into a craving problem. But most of you will find that you do best with a high-protein, low-carb diet where you have multiple meals through the day. Now, the vitamin powder gives you what should have been in the diet at optimal levels, but there are certain things that our body makes that are not found in the diet and that you need to take separately. 3 wonderful nutrients for optimizing energy. One is called ribose. The other is acetylcarnitine. The acetylcarnitine just take for 3 months. And then coenzyme Q10. Take 200 milligrams a day. Take it with food. The ribose, you don't want to get the capsules because it's 30 pills a day. You want to get the powder. And you want to take 1 5-gram scoop 3 times a day. what we found in our study of 257 people at 53 doctors' offices was that one scoop, 5 grams 3 times a day, and it looks and tastes like sugar, but it's yeast can't eat it, and it doesn't throw the blood sugar off. It actually lowers it just a touch. But after 3 weeks, energy went up an average of 61%. Sleep, 29% improvement. Brain fog improved. Pain went down. Overall well-being, 37%. That's from one nutrient. So that's what I do each morning is a vitamin powder, my fish oil, a special highly absorbed curcumin, and the ribose. That's my morning regimen. So for anybody, I'm going to use ribose for anybody with chronic fatigue, fibro, chronic pain, chronic Lyme, or cardiac conditions. We just mix it in food or water. Twice a day is plenty for most people. I just take it in the morning myself. But after you're feeling better for 6 to 9 months, you can go from twice a day down to once a day. Most often you'll see effects by 1 container, 3 weeks, but take it with the vitamin. The main side effect is that it can be overstimulating, increase energy too much in some people. If that happens, you want to give adrenal support, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and then lower the dose of ribose. So the optimizing nutrition, critical, and it's easy. You're going to find what I just described is not a handful of pills. It's basically 1 drink and maybe 3 or 4 pills a day. Now, let's take a look at sleep. You want to be sure to get a good night's sleep, and you can't because your sleep center's not working. So you can lie in bed for 24 hours a day, and you're just going to lie there. You can't get to sleep. But it's critical to get your good, solid, at least 8 hours sleep a night for it to heal up. So how do you do that if you can't stay in sleep because of the fibromyalgia? Many of you find you have trouble falling asleep or initiating sleep, and also trouble staying asleep. You wake up, it's as if the universe has a 2 a.m. alarm clock that goes off and wakes you up every night. And you can see this in the night sweats, low blood sugar, a host of different things. And these are all easy to address and treat. So a good way to begin, you want, because of the drop in blood sugar, if you find you wake up at 2 in the morning frequently, try eating a hard-boiled egg before you go to bed, a 1-ounce protein snack. It can be some meat, cheese, fish. See if that decreases the frequency. If it does, it suggests you have a drop in blood sugar that's going on. But I like to begin with herbal mixes. There are several that are very helpful. They help relax the muscles, decrease the pain, improve sleep quality, and keep you asleep. There's a mix of essential oils, mandarin zest oil, lemon balm, which also has antiviral effects. So the nice thing about herbs, with medications, you get all these side effects. And with herbs, you get all of these side benefits. So you have the antiviral effect of the lemon balm. You've got Ravensara leaf oil, lavender. So there's a mix of essential oils. You can get them all in 1 capsule. Nice, simple thing. And then there's a mix of other herbs and nutrients, passion flower, 5-HTP, valerian hops, theanine, lemon balm. And again, you can combine these. The more lemon balm, the better. So these two together make a wonderful herbal sleep combination to get a start at getting sleep. But no 1 or even 2 treatments are going to be enough to overcome the problem with disordered sleep in fibromyalgia. You're going to need probably 4 or 5 different things. And I like using a mix of herbals, combined then with very low doses of specific medications. And because if you use a high dose of one medication, you're going to be hungover the whole next day. Where if you use very low doses of several things, the herbs, you can take a full dose, medications at tiny doses. You get most of the benefit at the low dose, and you're not hungover the next day. But let me give you one really, really cool thing. That's a relatively new herbal. Now, echinacea say it's older than we are, yes. But there's this one special component of echinacea. It's a unique component that has really unique properties. And those properties are that they're as effective as Valium for anxiety, and they help sleep with no hangover, no addiction, all natural. Um, and anybody who has sleep issues, or even if it's not from anxiety, I take this myself in the evening because I still take the herbals uh, for sleep. It's just even when people recover from their fibromyalgia, I recommend they stay on the vitamin powder, their ribose, and just something for sleep. So, and I follow my own advice, even though I feel great. So, um, I would use a special form of echinacea. You can't get it at most, if you just health food stores. But it's 20 to 40 milligrams, 1 or 2 pills an hour before bedtime. And then you can take it twice a day for those with anxiety. It takes 6 weeks to see the full effect, but it is wonderful. If you have anxiety, go for it. If you have trouble sleeping, add this into the mix. Some other natural sleep aids, a little bit of calcium can help at bedtime, but it needs to be magnesium. Magnesium is much more effective than calcium, 100 to 300 milligrams. Main downside of the magnesium is it can cause loose stools, so lower the dose if that's a problem. Melatonin, 1/2 to 5 milligrams. As you mentioned, do the 1 ounce protein snack at bedtime, like a hard-boiled egg is an easy way to do it, and see if that helps stabilize your blood sugars at night. The way you'll tell is you won't wake up wide awake as much if that's the case. You'll know in the first 2 days of doing it if it's helping. And then, especially in this time of year still, a good hot Epsom salts bath about a half hour before bedtime will relax you and your muscles, decrease the pain, and help you ease into sleep. You want to take 2 cups of Epsom salts. They're easy to find, they're cheap. Epsom salts and magnesium salts, put them in a tub of hot water, have a nice soak. And what I would do, pour yourself, if your body is okay with the alcohol, sometimes people with candida have trouble tolerating alcohol, pour yourself a little bit of wine. It's okay. I mean, a lot of wine will disrupt sleep, but if 1 glass isn't going to, it'll help you fall asleep. Have a little bit of chocolate, or get the best tasting one you can, or something else that's a reward time. This is a reward for making it through the day. You have light some candles, put on some relaxing music, and soak. This is part of your bedtime routine. And for those of you who have kids, it's important to set up a routine that kind of tells the body, okay, we're ready to ease into sleep. And, as adults, we're really just big kids. And having our own bedtime routine really does help the body shift from that adrenaline mode into the rest and go to sleep mode. And this is a very good way to do it. And the Epsom salt bath makes a nice difference with that. And then again, I will use very low doses of several different medications. As needed, add it to the natural remedies. Start natural and then add on the medications as needed to get your 8 hours of sleep at night. Now, let me share a fun little tidbit. Anybody guess what the average night's sleep was in the United States until 135 years ago? How many hours a night on average people got? 9 hours a night was the average night's sleep. What happened 135 years ago? Light bulbs. So if you're needing your 9 hours, that's funny because Dr. Oz and his wife are friends of mine, and she had mentioned, when I mentioned this, she said, I need my 9 hours sleep. She was feeling like a sleep glutton because she needed her 9 hours, and to hear that that's normal, and it is normal. See the amount of sleep that leaves you feeling the best. Now, let's take a look at hormones. That's the H and shine. Hormones are produced by glands. They're basically our body's communication system. The thyroid hormone is our body's gas pedal. The adrenal is the stress handler. And then there are reproductive hormones. The reproductive hormones are critical not just for reproduction, but critical for energy, mood, sleep, and a host of other things as well. Now, what you see in fibromyalgia is that circuit breaker that controls the hormone system, called the hypothalamic pituitary axis, is offline. And it's important with blood tests. And this is I'll give you an analogy that Dr. Oz asked if he could run with. I can't go for it. Do you know where the normal range comes from on blood testing? Well, here's a shock. Most doctors don't either. I'll lecture to 300, 400, 500 doctors at a time. And I'll ask, who here knows how the normal ranges are derived? And unless they've heard me talk before, no hands go up. And one day I was wondering, when I was early in my medical career, where the hell do they get these normal ranges? I had presumed, and were given to understand, though nobody said it, that you have committees of wise, old, elder doctors with long white beards who would sit there and look through all the research and say, well, if it's in this range, there's probably no problem. No, that's not how it works. You take 100 people and you apply what's called 2 standard deviations. What that means is that the 95 in the middle, you test 100 people, the 95 in the middle of the normal range. So if I wanted a normal range for shoe sizes, I'd check 100 people and I'd get a normal range of 5 to 13. Now, can you imagine, I live in Hawaii and we live on an active volcano and you don't want to trap the lava in. So, people leave their shoes at the door. Can you imagine? So we both leave and say, I and this other gal leave the house and we got our shoes mixed up and I'm wearing her size 8 and she's got my size 13. And we go to the shoe doctor and the shoe doctor, she says, the shoe is too big. He looks at it and says, no, honey, it's a size 13. It's a normal range. There's nothing wrong with the shoe. And I say, it's too small. She says, no, Jacob, smack dab in the normal range. It's an 8. 5 to 13 is normal. Nothing wrong with the shoe. I say, my toe doesn't fit in the damn thing. And he'd look at me like I'm crazy and just send me out. How many of you had that experience, going to get your thyroid and the other hormones checked? So hormonal deficiencies are common despite normal blood tests. How do you tell? You tell by the symptoms, not the blood tests. And then you treat with bioidentical hormones. So let's take a look at thyroid. What are the symptoms of low thyroid? Tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant. Sounds familiar? I'll treat with Armour Thyroid, and I will give iodine 6¼ milligrams a day. This is also critical for optimizing thyroid function. Weight gain, a study in our research center showed the average weight gain, 32.5 pounds. And you can help promote the weight loss. It's possible to lose the weight just by trying to diet this disease. The problem is the metabolism is off. So optimizing thyroid and adrenal, acetylcarnitine, 1,000 milligrams a day helps a little bit. Treating the candida, getting 8 hours sleep a night. The studies show over and over, if you don't get enough sleep, you gain an average 6.5 pounds and have a 30% higher risk of obesity because you make growth hormone during sleep that causes us to turn fat to muscle. And treating insulin resistance. So these are the keys to addressing weight gain in this disease so that you can start to get back to yourself in many ways. So let's look at adrenal. Adrenal is a stress handler. Chronic stress, whether it's physical stress or situational stress. We live in an environment where instead of news, you have what used to be, you have the news half hour a day. They give the news, here's what's going on in the world. And it's changed from that to 24 hours a day. And they try to make everything a crisis and put everybody at each other's throats to get people to stay glued to the TV set for 24 hours a day so they can sell advertising. And if you look at the 5 major news networks, you're going to think we're on 5 different planets. So at least 4 of them are wrong. And I'll give you a clue, all 5 of them. What's the medical term? FOS, full of stool? Anyway, it's nonsense, but it does constantly leave people feeling like everything's a crisis. And it contributes to adrenal burnout. So turn it off. You're not going to be uninformed. How did Mark Twain put it? He said, if you don't watch the news, you're going to be uninformed. But if you do watch the news, you're going to be misinformed. Okay, turn it off. Your adrenals will thank you. So how do you tell if you have low adrenal? It's very simple. You get irritable when hungry. It's funny, they've coined the term hangry and try to sell candy bars, which is the worst thing in the world you can do. You'll feel better a half hour after, and an hour and a half later, you're going to be even worse and hangrier. But it sells candy bars. So anyway, but if you get hangry, irritable and hungry, you need adrenal support. If you get that way, tell your loved one and those people close to you when I get irritable, do not hug me, do not try to reason with me, do not any of that. Just feed me, and then you'll feel better. So you'll save yourself a lot of marriage counseling and divorce lawyer bills up. Make up a little card. So when I get irritable, just feed me. But when you do the adrenal support, that goes away. Treatment of infections. You find every infection comes by, you get it takes forever to go away. You treat the adrenal, suddenly you go through the winter with no infections, everybody else is sick. So that adrenal support, really big thing. So how do you support the adrenal function? There's a wonderful mix. You get all of these in one capsule. It's pregnenolone, and we find that a very large percent of people with fibromyalgia have low pregnenolone levels on their blood test. Vitamin C, pantothenic acid, licorice, which slows your body's breakdown of cortisol and makes your own cortisol last longer, and has, again, antiviral side benefits. Amanita, adrenal extract, a little bit of DHEA, L-tyrosine, all of these in combination, amazing adrenal support. So, and then for the, how do you tell if you need estrogen or progesterone? If your fibro symptoms are worse around your menses. I'm not talking about PMS stuff, I'm talking about the poor sleep, fatigue, headaches, that kind of stuff worse around your menses. You probably need estrogen support. Most men will need testosterone support. 70% are in the lowest 30th percentile of testosterone. So with Lyme disease, we talked about how Lyme is an important trigger, but there are many other infections that also, Lyme is really important, and there's other things though that you don't want to miss. So we talked about Candida, and again, I suspect Candida in virtually everybody with fibromyalgia, and I'm going to just go ahead and treat it. And the way that I treat it will be with a good probiotic, avoiding sugar, and I'll use antifungals, but I will use some medication like Flucan, and there's a compounded sinus spray that can be very helpful. But what are the symptoms of Candida? Tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant, brain fog. So how do you tell apart from fibromyalgia? Well, it also causes chronic nasal congestion, sinusitis when it gets severe, and gas, bloating, diarrhea, or constipation. So those are the hallmarks. And you'll find that the chronic sinusitis and the irritable bowel syndrome go away when you treat the Candida and sometimes other bacterial infections as well. So you want to look for and treat these other infections. Viral infections, antibiotic-sensitive, yeast, parasites. Lyme is one of many. And again, I'm going to treat predominantly based on symptoms. I'm going to have a high index of suspicion. Now, let's wrap up by looking at pain and just a few other quick things. If you want the pain to go away, you need to understand pain is not an outside invader. Pain is part of our body's normal monitoring system saying that something needs attention. It's kind of like the oil light or warning lights on your body's dashboard. And if you give your body what it needs, the pain goes away. It's just like if you put oil in the car, the oil light goes out. What do you do medically? You go to the doctor, say, this flashing red light's annoying me, they smash it with a hammer. No. You know, wonder why pain is so poorly treated in this country. No, you put oil in the car if the oil light's on. You know, you need to give the body what it's asking for. So there's many different kind of monitoring warning lights. And there's actually, people say, well, how do I know what it is? There's a nice app called Cures, C-U-R-E-S, capital A-C. C like zebra. So Cures A-C. It's a free app. There's a $2 upgrade if you want. And for iPhone, Android. And you can look up anything from A to Z, acne to zoster, and look up each kind of pain. It'll say, here's what's going on, and here are the best of the natural things and even the medications to make it go away. So what's my favorite pain reliever? There's a mix of a special highly absorbed curcumin combined with boswellia, DLPA, kinase that addresses the immune system. Inflammation is too narrow a word for it, but many different things. All these different immune pathways are affected and balanced by the special highly absorbed curcumin and boswellia. This mix has been a pain relief miracle for people. The problem is if you just use curcumin, it doesn't work unless you take about 30 pills a day because it's not absorbed very well. It'll work a little bit. But what opened up this whole area of curcumin research for me was a study that showed that if they add turmeric, the turmeric essential oil, to the curcumin, you increase the absorption sevenfold. So and if you just took a regular turmeric pill, it would take 350 to 500 of those to get the same effect of one of these special curcumins. So if you want a pain relief miracle, again, that combination is all in one capsule. That's curcumin, but that special highly absorbed one, boswellia, DLPA. DLPA is kind of like a way of increasing your body's own endorphin pain molecules, and nattokinase to break up the inflammation. When I first tried this, I thought, maybe it'll be a little helpful. And 6 weeks later, and it takes 6 weeks to see the full effect. It takes a half hour for it to start to work, but it keeps building and building and building in effectiveness. You can take it with any other pain medications. But I had people on that the morphine wasn't helping, and this made the pain go away. It's just really, really good. Give it 6 weeks, see what it does for you. I would also, for special areas of pain, get a topical comfrey cream that you can rub over the area of pain. And then, as you mentioned, there's 7 key kinds of pain. We're not going to go through all of those. That's another talk. But the brain pain or central sensitization is a key part of the pain once the pain has become chronic. So interestingly, the antibiotic doxycycline and minocycline have been shown to markedly decrease central sensitization brain pain. Another medication you can get from compounding holistic pharmacies is called low-dose naltrexone. It takes 2 months to see the effect of that. So again, these are just several of many things you can do for pain. Many of you have low blood pressure. You tend to get exhausted and brain foggy when you're upright. Email me at fatiguedoc@gmail.com. The address is on the slide, fatiguedoc@gmail.com. I'll send you a free 2-minute quiz that will screen for orthostatic intolerance, which is present in a large majority of people with fibromyalgia, and give you information on how to take care of that. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this talk because we're getting near the top of the hour here. Mind, body, let's wrap up. All illnesses are a combination of both physical and psychospiritual components. Whether you have multiple sclerosis, which is associated with repressed rage, which is why the illness is so sweet. Ovarian cancer with a hopeless personality. The mind-body thing, think about what that would look like for an energy crisis. And basically, and this is not for everybody, but for many people, it tended to be low self-esteem as a child. We were approval seekers. We were trying to be all things to all people. We weren't able to say no. People ask us for things where we should have said no. Our gut was saying say no, and we said yes, because we wanted to avoid conflict. And we're overachievers who take care of everybody except who? Ourselves. So the people ask, should I go for counseling? Well, that's, it's like any other disease. If you have cancer and you're having trouble coping or you need some help coping, sure. So when do you go for counseling in this disease? You don't go for counseling because the doctor's an idiot and hasn't taken time to look at the research and says, I don't know what's wrong with you, so you're crazy. You go to counseling if you feel like it will be helpful. It's really straightforward. But you want to be careful. People tend to go into what they have. My cardiologist found I had heart disease, gastroenterologist found lactose intolerant. I do chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. I had that. And my psychiatry friends tended to be crazy. At least they were. Some of them have done brilliant work and self-work, and they're now outstanding people. But many, if not most of them out there, are still just kind of crazy. So if you go for counseling, be sure the psychoanalyst is one word and not 2. Again, you want to make sure that they're not crazy, and you'll know by how it feels. So there are some other natural things that can be helpful. Massage, acupressure, although acupressure and acupuncture are too weak by themselves. They're very good techniques, but in fibromyalgia, The main thing is that they can help release the trigger points. Uh, Manipulation, chiropractic, herbals, nutrition, CBT. The problem with cognitive behavioral therapy is that the way that it's done is, and this is only in fibromyalgia, you have some crazy people, I'm not going to name names, who basically have said, well, counseling helps, learning coping skills helps, and therefore people are crazy and they don't have a real disease. They don't say that. They keep denying that they say that, but they do that. They push for laws, and it's just nuts. So CBT, the way it's described for fibromyalgia, is toxic. But if you go to somebody who's not part of that group and system and mindset, who does CBT, who can just teach you coping skills for pain and sleep, that can be helpful. And NAT, an emotional freedom technique, can be helpful. The EFT is very good for releasing old traumas. For those of you who are PTSD and things like that, the EFT and a book, Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. For those who want more information, if you want more of kind of almost like a textbook, like the classic From Fatigue to Fantastic will make your fibromyalgia expert. If you want more of an easy read, and it's a good way to begin, you can start with the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution. And then if you wanted more in-depth, you can get the Fatigue to Fantastic. Again, I'm happy to help you get your life back. I treat people worldwide, very often by phone because people are too ill to travel. If you want to email me at thefatiguedoc@gmail.com, happy to give more information. And go do the free energy analysis program. That's step 3 at vitality101.com. So www.vitality101.com. It'll take you 10-15 minutes to do the quiz. You'll get a list. Here are the things contributing to your low energy. Here's what you need to do to optimize energy production. And this way you can get your life back. So the news, chronic Lyme and fibromyalgia are now treatable. And so it is. I saw it myself in my own case and treating thousands of people. So I am happy to stay and ask questions. Cheryl, I'm not sure. I don't see the questions on my screen. So
no worries, Dr. Teitelbaum. We'll get those questions to you. I see quite a few. Shall we get started? But before we start, I do want to thank you. And I also want you to know that there are several messages that I've received both publicly and privately in both the Q&A and the chat boxes, thanking you so much for such a wonderful presentation and for all the wonderful and valuable information that you've shared today. So thank you. Now, are we ready to get started with some questions?
Let's do it. Showtime.
All right, let's hop in. Here's a person who said that she was tested many years ago for Lyme disease because of her fibromyalgia, but it came back. Oops, my question just lurched a little bit. Excuse me. Sorry, I started to read that, and then the question. We've had a few technical difficulties. The question disappeared. So let me try that again.
Well, let me talk about testing in general.
All right, why don't you?
Because the standard testing that you do at Western Lab, called the Western Blot, kind of screening, will miss the majority, probably the large majority of people who have Lyme disease. And this is from the British Medical Journal. It said that doing the blood testing is no more than a coin toss. Some other tests, I almost never see anybody come back negative. And I suspect that I tested 10 healthy people, and my my hubcap would come back positive. So I've kind of shied away from the test. The test can be helpful, and especially if you're dealing with doctors who say there's nothing wrong with you, all the tests are normal, it's helpful. But in real life, I prefer to use those symptoms that I gave, or if the person simply, if they have a history of feeling better after taking an antibiotic. It's funny how many people come and say, I had this infection, I took this, and my fibromyalgia went away for 2 weeks while I was taking it. Well, then keep taking it. It's like, so I like to use clinical symptoms and response to treatment to guide treatment. I find those more helpful than testing. That's just my own personal style and approach.
Excellent. So for individuals who are tested for Lyme disease and they come back negative, then they should probably look into following the fibromyalgia protocol. Or
and
I know that
they still need to be considered for Lyme disease.
Right.
That they're negative doesn't mean they don't have it, Cheryl.
Right. So that they might be working with their doctor for a trial anyway to see if it has improvement, and if not, then they can move into the fibro protocol?
Yes, or do it all together.
All right, here we go. Here's a person who says they have menopause and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. The best way to handle the sleep problem, she wants to know, and not flashes and weight gain. I apologize, I've just got a few words here. So I guess I'm wondering if are there special considerations when your concerns are compounded by menopausal issues?
Absolutely, because the drop in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, even in women for the testosterone, can significantly trigger and worsen not just the sleep, but the fibromyalgia in general. It's especially women who've had a hysterectomy. The doctor will often say, well, you don't need progesterone for the menopause because you have no uterus and you're not going to get uterus cancer. But progesterone isn't just there to prevent uterine cancer. The progesterone is critical for sleep. So even if a woman has had a hysterectomy, I do recommend the bioidentical biased for the estrogen, progesterone, and if the testosterone level is not in the upper half of the normal range, I'll add a milligram or two of testosterone. But I think it's really important to go ahead and do a trial of the bioidentical hormones. And then I'll also go with the natural remedies and even the medications that we talked about.
Excellent, excellent. Here's a person who wants to know if, would you recommend the licorice even for people who have high cortisol if they have other problems with adrenal function?
Yes, because here's the thing. I won't use the licorice if the person has high blood pressure. And most people with this illness have low blood pressure. When I see high blood pressure in this illness, I'm going to screen for sleep apnea. With the high cortisol, often the cortisol is higher than normal, but still not high enough for the stress that your body is facing, often from infections or inflammation. And then the question arises, is the symptom coming from cortisol being too high or not high enough for the stress? And the way that you tell is I'll give the adrenal support or even a little bit of bioidentical hydrocortisone, see if the person feels better. If they feel better on the hydrocortisone, then their body needs a little more. And I'll give the adrenal support plus that. If, on the other hand, they feel worse, then that tells me, well, the cortisol is too high, and that's causing a problem. Then I'm going to give ashwagandha and mostly phosphatidylserine. I give about 100 milligrams of phosphatidylserine to 200 milligrams in the morning. But what I'll also do is if the person's mind is wide awake, many people find your adrenal is low during the day, but too high at bedtime. Most people need to run a cortisol of 18 in the morning and under 2 at bedtime. So it goes both ways. If it doesn't drop enough at bedtime, you're going to feel like your mind is wide awake and racing at bedtime. And then the phosphatidylserine, about 100 to 200 milligrams an hour before bedtime, and maybe some ashwagandha with it can be very helpful. So these are the probes, the way that we tell. We give the adrenal support, bioidentical cortisol. Do you feel better? Okay, then that says you need more. If not, then I give phosphatidylserine predominantly and see, okay, does that feel better? And both during the day and at bedtime for sleep. Some people just need it at sleep time. So this way, the best way to tell is not by the blood tests, but it's how your body, the symptoms your body has and how it reacts to treatment. That tells you much more effectively what's going on.
I've heard the mantra, treat the person, not the numbers.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we've got a question. Have you ever used, or what do you think of using Artemisia for Lyme's disease?
Good. Well, it's good for parasites, and there's so many co-infections, the Babesiosis, the others, that may be sensitive to the Artemisia. It's a very reasonable treatment. Excellent. In addition,
excellent.
But not as a primary.
Okay.
Stevia, interestingly, the raw stevias have been shown to have effectiveness. The ones that are all cloudy and kind of thick have been shown to have effectiveness against Lyme also. There's many things that help suppress the different bugs. There's some very good protocols out there, even all natural ones.
Mm-hmm. Another question, is there a topical form of ribose, or do you have to take it orally?
No, you have to take it by mouth.
All right.
And it's well tolerated by mouth. Most people find it's really easy on the system. And you can always use a lower dose. The main problem with the ribose is that if your adrenal is low, it may drop your blood sugar a little bit and make you hyper. In this case, that just tells you you need adrenal support. Go on the adrenal supplement, then back on the ribose.
Here's a person who has had years of postnasal drip. Is there anything you can do to help her?
Oh, God, yes. Treat the candida. And there's a sinusitis nose spray. You can get it compounded. ITC Pharmacy does it by mail. You could email them, and your doctor can call it in at his prescription. The nose spray combined with treating the candida will usually knock out the postnasal drip. Now, once in a while, you'll see a deviated septum that's causing it, and then that. But first, I'm going to treat the candida. Then, if it persists, then they get the septal repair. But the vast majority of people, like over 95%, will find that you treat the candida, use a nose spray, address allergies with NAT, and then surgery as a last resort.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really informative. I hadn't heard of some of those before. That's interesting.
So we still keep teaching each other the new things, Cheryl.
Excellent. Hey, we got another one from a person who is taking a thyroid hormone, WP 130 milligrams daily. She wants to know if she can still take iodine, and if so, do you have a dosage recommendation?
6.25 milligrams.
Okay, so 6.25, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Let's see. Here's a person who said they recently heard that Lyme's disease can be contagious between people. Is that true?
No. Don't bite them and stick your tongue into them like mosquitoes. No.
So it's a tick-borne disease, but you don't pass it from person to person.
Yeah. I mean, yes. It's funny, you know, all this stuff goes out on Facebook and the internet and stuff. The internet is great at giving information, but it's horrible at giving perspective. If you have a freckle and you go on the internet, you're going to be convinced that you're going to be dead of melanoma in a year. I mean, it's just, So I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've gone through probably over 100,000 studies and treated thousands and thousands of people, and I'm very good at giving perspective. So if I can help in that way, I'm happy to.
Here's a question on pregnenolone for adrenal support. What do you recommend as a starting dose, and how long after you've been on it would you expect to see any benefits?
The benefits are more in the background. It's not like some things like the adrenal product, people like within 2 weeks are going, oh my God, this is outstanding. The pregnenolone is in the background to just help support the production of the other hormones. So it's not one of those things that gives a wow effect, but it makes it easier for other things to give that effect. The nice thing about the adrenal product is that it has the pregnenolone in it as part of about 6, 7 other things. It's just all there. So it's supporting in the background. If I'm giving the pregnenolone separately, there's no widespread agreement on dosing. It's anywhere from 10 milligrams a day to 15 milligrams twice a day or even higher. But I think for many people, just starting with that 10 is a good place.
Excellent. And one last question that came in. Here's a person who has a multitude of issues going on. She has CFS and fibromyalgia, suffers from insomnia, has many food allergies, is hypersensitive to a lot of things, and doesn't seem to handle supplements very well. What would you recommend for the insomnia, and so that she can sleep till morning? She supposes her cortisol is very high at night. And she also says, and a little bit more information, that her symptoms are worse at ovulation. At that time, she also gets nauseous, some vertigo, and extremely anxious.
So you have the mast cell activation, which should be addressed. And you can begin with quercetin, which is a bioflavonoid, 500 milligrams, taken twice a day, an antihistamine. Many of the over-the-counter antihistamines, they have sedating ones for nighttime, non-sedating ones during the day. That can help the sensitivity reaction, along with doing the NAET, because that decreases many of the food and other sensitivities so your immune system can stand down and not be so overreactive. The phosphatidylserine ashwagandha combinations at bedtime for sleep will tell you very quickly whether the high adrenal is an issue or not. Ovulation, the estrogen and progesterone drop with ovulation, just like they do around the menses. And so when you have people, especially they get migraines around their periods or around ovulation, or they just feel worse in general, the bioidentical hormone replacement as a vaginal cream is the way that I find works the best, can be very helpful. And some people cycle it. Once a woman's 45 or higher, I just give it every day. I don't cycle it.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of using DIM, diindolylmethane, for people that are having some of these symptoms when there are sudden estrogen, progesterone drop-offs?
Yes, and they can be helpful. I prefer the bioidentical estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and then I'll add the DIM if needed to help stabilize that.
Excellent, excellent. Let's see if I've missed anything, since we did have a technical issue for a while. The screens, at least on our ends, had some issues and weren't displaying all of the questions and answers, so they've, thank goodness, come back.
And I do have a Facebook page in case there are any questions that weren't addressed. I do take questions on my Facebook page as well.
Excellent. What's your Facebook page, Dr. Teitelbaum?
I think it's Jacob Teitelbaum, MD. I'm not sure. How's
right.
that for odd? I don't even know my own Facebook
You know
page.
what? One of the benefits of having a slightly unusual last name is there cannot be that very many Jacob Teitelbaums on Facebook.
Exactly. T-E-I-T-E-L-B-A-U-M. And I think it's Jacob Teitelbaum, MD, is just what it goes by. So.
Right. So they can just ask you their questions specifically there. They have some questions. And I was just notified that another question came in. Jennifer, what was that question?
Hi, Jennifer.
Can Lyme's disease or dengue fever lead to rheumatoid arthritis?
Probably not. Even though rheumatoid and dengue I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to pass on the dengue part. But the Lyme disease triggers a lot of things, but it can cause joint inflammation, but I've never seen it cause rheumatoid arthritis. On the other hand, there's a number of really solid studies showing that doxycycline or minocycline, the antibiotic, helps rheumatoid arthritis. And because of that, the theory was that the joints, the immune system is reacting to an infection that looked like the joints, and the joints were innocent bystanders in that. But it could also just be that it helped the central sensitization brain pain we talked about. So I don't think that Lyme triggers rheumatoid arthritis. I can trigger joint inflammation. But I do routinely in people with rheumatoid arthritis. I talked about that herbal mix with the curcumin boswellia, which in a head-on blinded study was shown to be as effective as Celebrex or more for rheumatoid arthritis. And I will use the doxycycline or minocycline, actually.
There's the person who asked the questions about the symptoms worsening at ovulation and the many food sensitivities had a further follow-up. She said that, did she understand that you were recommending estrogen cream, but you were saying bioidentical, meaning specific doses of estrogen, progesterone, and potentially even testosterone. Is that what you were saying about that might be useful for her?
The vaginal cream, and it's bioidentical, doesn't relate to the dosing. Okay. It relates to the form. It's important to understand that to be able to patent the medication in this country, unless you have a new way of giving it, it has to be a chemical that's never been seen on the planet before. It has to be new so you can patent it. If you try to patent regular progesterone or estrogen, you can't because it's old. You know, it's not something new. And if you can't patent it, you can't charge what the drug companies charge or put it through the $2.9 billion FDA approval process. So it's just because of a quirk in our system that they have to turn it into a new molecule. That's not the same thing that your body has wanted to use or wants to use so that they can sell it. Bioidentical means it's cheap, And it's the same exact molecule that your body has had there for your whole lifetime. And those, the studies show, are much healthier. It's just the drug companies don't use them as much because they're not as profitable.
The follow-up question, and I think this is our last one in the list, has to do with what about wild yam cream for progesterone?
You know, the concept of wild yam or diascoria getting converted enough, that's, you know, wishful thinking. Close your eyes, wish on a star, and hope it doesn't.
But it is true that there are progesterone creams on the market that you can buy over the counter. You just
Absolutely,
need to look.
Those work.
If you're in the United States, you need to look for one that says a certain percentage. It's standardized to a certain percentage of progesterone, and that they usually say it's USP progesterone. But the problem with the wild yam cream, my understanding is that while they may use yams to create it in a laboratory, that process doesn't happen in your body.
Exactly so. You said it much more elegantly than I did.
I don't know about that. All right. So I am glancing through. I got some other messages. Thanking you so much. It's greatly appreciated, Dr. Teitelbaum. I find your presentation easy to understand. So lots of wonderful comments. I hope that you will come back and join us again, because every time you're with us for any of our Terry Talks Nutrition webinars, regardless of the topic, you always provide such useful information that can make a real difference in people's whole lives.
Well, everybody, thank you for coming. And again, you can get well. You really can. This is a really, really treatable disease. So use the information, use the tools. But one thing I want to finish with, Cheryl, as you get better, don't use your energy, your newfound energy, to go back to what made you sick in the first place, or your body will shut you down again. If things don't feel good, say no. Use your energy to do things that feel good, not what your brain is telling you should do, which is your programming as a kid. Listen to your gut. How does it feel? If it feels good, use your energy for that. If not, if things don't feel good, I want you to learn to say one simple magic word: no. And no, there's a great t-shirt that said, what part of no didn't you understand? It's a complete sentence, very versatile.
All right.
Use this to get a life you love. That's what this is about. And then it will have made it totally worthwhile, which it already is for you to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Fun.